Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and in today's video, sponsored by the makers of Call of Dragons, it's time to review the developer Q&A, and it's number 12. It's hard to believe it's actually been over a year since the game's been released. It's been a while past a year, but whatever. Here we go, 12 Q&A. And the first thing in here is Alliance Siege Bastions. Love them or hate them, you've probably got a strong opinion. The question is, Alliance Siege Bastions currently have a huge effect on warfare, leading to protracted stalemates between forces. Rallies and garrisons also lead to drawn-out sieges, making the game feel more like a grind. Are you looking into ways to remedy this? Now, look, I have very, very strong feelings here, and I'll share them with you fully in a moment. But let's see what the developers' thoughts are. When we began designing Alliance Siege Bastions, we hoped to create a building that could suitably increase the duration of battles, preventing them from ending too quickly and making any enjoyment fleeting. Now, it's funny, I'll react to this. I thought they were supposed to be like an offensive structure to take out flags, not a defensive structure. So my initial understanding of what they were supposed to be is completely backwards from the reality of the way they were designed to operate. Looking at the season as a whole, this could result in wars ending quickly and entering a period of farming resources. Spending too long farming resources would also negatively impact the player experience. I do agree that too much farming is a problem. I generally think this game has a lot of fighting, and more fighting than any game in this genre that I'm aware of. So you can like kind of bottomlessly fight in a season in this game, but that's, I think, a function of the free healing. In addition, we discovered that although the introduction of Alliance Siege Bastions did help us achieve our design goals to an extent by extending the duration of battles, long-term rally garrison gameplay also tended to sap players' will to fight and take the joy out of what was meant to be exciting PvP gameplay. I want to comment on this for just a second, and this idea of sapping players' will to fight. You know, in Rise of Kingdoms, okay, the expectation is that you lose the overwhelming majority of your troops like every single KVK, if that's what's needed, and like if everybody else is still fighting. And it's funny because in this game, our alliance, following on to what will eventually be the meta for this game, you just don't realize it yet. I mean this respectfully, but like the meta will be an expectation of dead troops from every single player, but no other sort of kingdom in the game does this. So I think ultimately we may have sort of scrapped this idea of having a dead troop minimum. And people hear that in this game and they're like, oh, that's offensive. Losing troops is offensive. It's so interesting to see how many years behind we are from where Rise of Kingdoms communities have grown to understand that, like, I'm a contributor. It is my honor to send my troops in KVK to be a part of the team and not a deadweight who's just accumulating power and not contributing it. And like, there's 100 million reasons why it's so good for players to drop power in fights. It makes for better migrations. It makes sure that everybody's a contributor. And when you know everybody's a contributor, you're more willing to contribute because you're not doing it alone. You're doing it with everyone who also fulfills that same sense of duty and obligation, right? But players of this game, I think, aren't there yet and have a very averse reaction to losing troops, which is very interesting. And I think a part of that comes from the free healing system, because you need so many troops to capitalize on free healing that there is a more real feel bad for losing troops, because you know that you're losing out on a huge amount of healing capability as well. So I think there's a push and pull in the design of the game that's like, hey, lose your troops, but also don't lose your troops. You need them for free healing. So I think that is a very, very critical anti-synergy, or that's not really the right language, but the push and pull there is very real. So that's why I think the communities in this game still aren't yet requiring sort of dead troops, because I think mentally and emotionally players are not there yet. And it's because I think free healing benefits so much from having more troops. So they say, as a result, we intend to retain Alliance Siege Bastions, so they're not going anywhere, adding improvements that are currently in the design stage. Possible improvements include reducing the amount of time needed to remove Alliance Siege Bastions. So like destroy them, I think is what they mean. Not remove them, but reducing the time to destroy them. Maybe. This would speed up rally garrison combat. Oh, no, maybe I don't understand what they're saying. This would speed up rally garrison combat, making it a pillar of warfare without making it too powerful, and finding a role that suits its environment. I mean, There's several, I think, things that they're trying to solve here, and let me share my perspective. The first thing that is weird, okay, is the rally garrison meta in this game, respectfully, right? Like, right now, it makes more sense to garrison with a rally leader, that's Goresh, than it does a garrison captain commander. And that's weird. So a part of the weirdness here is the rally garrison meta feels like they're still trying to land on a healthy balance of kind of all the troop types being involved and countering. And you don't want too much countering, as weird as that sounds. Like, you kind of want rock, paper, scissors, but you kind of don't. Because what happens if you have full rock, paper, scissors is like you fill the garrison with archers, let's say, then they rally you with cavalry. So then you take all the archers out of the garrison and you stuff infantry in the garrison. So then they got to cancel the rally and they got to rally you with mages, right? But then you see they're rallying with mages. So you take all the mages out and you put a bunch of marksmen back in. Whatever that sort of blend is, right? Like, I think it's important to arrive at like a really healthy rally garrison meta. And like, maybe we're there, maybe we aren't. I don't know. That is like a very tricky thing to balance with all these different troop types. So that's one piece of the puzzle, right? Is like getting that to a good spot. The next piece of the puzzle is, I think, the allergies to troop loss, which I think are much higher in this game than I would have expected. And I think it's in part, and I'm not calling for a nerf to free healing, right? If anything, I'm calling for a buff to free healing, where like you can achieve the current maximum of free healing with a much lower amount of troops. I think would be really, really cool. My perspective. And the sort of final thing is that, like, you know, my experience of these siege bastions is that somebody puts a bastion down, and like in this last season, we fought against, as I understand it, like the number 1 and number 2 by power or by players kingdoms in the game, and they both allied each other, which is an extreme silliness in my opinion. But like, they did that, and like even they were just terrified to rally us. Like, they did everything within their power to avoid rallying our siege bastions. So I think there's a weirdness here that like has to get solved. And I suppose I'm not really jabbing directly at like how to solve them, because I don't exactly know how to solve them. But I will point out, right, that in a prior season, we were just absolutely decimating. Okay, we were decimating these guys. And I don't need to get into the whole history with this group that betrayed us in the past, blah, blah, blah. But then they put a bastion in a spot that was actually unpassable by any other means than destroying the bastion. And like, they had 3 players rotating in and out of that thing, and it was infantry, and it took so long to burn that it was actually just like no amount of rallying could possibly clear them out of this garrison. Like, it was not possible. And even if we rallied for like 3 months straight without stopping, they'd still have troops to put in because the rate of troop loss was so low. So they actually, as I understand, doubled the rate of troop loss for infantry or changed it around. So all that to say, these bastions are too powerful as a defensive structure. And I think they're also too powerful as an offensive structure. So I would even think like changing the ratio of troop loss to not be so favorable for the defender potentially. If you're not going to mess with that, I don't know. These bastions are a big weirdness. And I think they're right to look at it, and I'm glad that they're looking at it, because this is something that, like, Rally Garrison, in my opinion, is a very fun part of this genre, and it just needs to be balanced. You shouldn't have a dramatically superior force completely unable to pass a position, regardless of like double rally or like with literal no way to crack a garrison with zombie garrison fillers, right? Like, you don't need skill. You just drop those troops in over and over. I think there's something there, right? You shouldn't be able to have absolute, total, and complete field dominance and then just be stopped. Okay, so moving on. The season map hasn't been updated in some time. Will there be a new season map? I feel fine about the season map. Creating new season map has been one of our core priorities. Each season of Strife has been based on an existing game world. We're currently pulling out all the stops to create a new map and bring you a brand new gameplay. Love it. We're also speeding up the production process of season 3 so we can bring you a new map filled with rich stories and interesting gameplay. I don't care about the stories. I'm very interested in the gameplay. When it's finished, all players currently in Season 2 will immediately enter Season 3 at the end of their current season. Will also be available as a scenario for Season of Strife. Oh, interesting. So we're getting like a new organization of the seasons, right? Is that what's happening? So players who are currently in Season of Strife won't have to miss out. We'll share more details with you as soon as the internal testing of the new map is finished. That's really interesting because this is also indicating they're sort of delaying the time frame in which a kingdom gets to Season of Strife. So like Season 1 is your home kingdom. Season 2 is the ice one. Season 3 will be this new season, right? It's very interesting. There aren't enough realms available for migration into the newest version. What will you do to fix this? I don't know what this means. There aren't enough realms available for migration. We will continue to adjust the migration system, trying as much as possible to avoid a situation where one server is dominant over all the others. Yeah, I think this is really critical. My understanding is that for a brief time, like you could migrate in twice as many players because some people complained because they couldn't get their group in. And like now there's a couple kingdoms that are just overly strong and it's created a huge power imbalance, but I don't actually know the situation, so I could be completely wrong. I don't want to misspeak, so I want to undermine my understanding while positing that I've heard this rumor. But following the release of the latest update, we have observed that most servers have not reached the 150 player migration limit. For those that have, we'll continue to observe and improve migration rules, optimizing the player experience while ensuring that no server can become too powerful. I can't overstate how important this is. If servers aren't balanced for years, everyone will have to deal with the silliness of that situation. So migration balance is critical. I know that kingdoms want to migrate in a gazillion players to be this really strong kingdom that can just destroy everybody and not have to try, which weirdly is what the strongest kingdoms in the game try to do here right now, which is so weird. Like rather than create good fights, they create easy wins for themselves, which like that's an anti-pattern that'll play itself out, and eventually those kingdoms will die that take too easy fights because ultimately people spend lots of money playing this game and they don't want to spend lots of money to not actually use it to fight, right? Like eventually the fighters will all leave those alliances. It's just a matter of time. They'll figure out who the real ones really are. Will you make it possible to know in advance whether we can join our fellow Alliance members in migrating to a new server? So this is really important. And in Rise of Kingdoms, the way that kingdoms handle this is actually like an extremely complex and sophisticated data tracking system. Like you make extremely, extremely detailed spreadsheets. You track the sort of power of the biggest kingdoms and how full they are. And you make sure that you have exactly the amount of power that you need. So like there's no in-game supported mechanism to enable you to easily figure out how many people can migrate to your kingdom before you flip to this Imperium state where no one can join anymore. And that's an oversimplification really. But like the sort of point I'm trying to make here is that it's very important for kingdoms to be able to plan their migrations. And in order to plan your migration, you need a lot of data. That data is not available in this game. So kingdoms are left in this lurch of like, we think these people are coming. We don't know if they're coming. And that creates a weird situation for communities as well, because communities need the ability to plan for themselves, right? Like the worst thing you can do is create a bad community experience, and unknown migration quantities is a bad community experience, right? So this is why they're looking at it. So we recently introduced the migration preview feature, which Alliance officers can find in the bottom right corner of the migration page. Officers can use this feature to simulate the results of Alliance members migrating to their destination server. We hope this feature will help players to make decisions regarding migration. Yeah, I mean, I think in my perfect world, and I think this might be the full way this feature works, but in my perfect world, you basically, leading up to a migration window, set up all the players that are going to migrate, and all of them are in the roster of like, on migration day, all of these players are coming. And then on migration day, it all happens. And it's like, boom, migration complete. All the players that, you know, had set up to go all at once, and everybody gets in. Easy peasy, right? Like something that just takes the mystery out of, will our community be destroyed or not? Right? Like, will our community be separated? Will we regret doing this? Because now we can't play together anymore. That's really big. So I'm glad to see that they've made a sort of simulation feature. I'm curious to learn more about it. I hope that it fully solves the problem. Let me know in the comments if it does, or how that, the details of how that works. Can you kick players out of your server? I mean, I think there's no world in which the developers would ever do this. We understand that players want to see better matchmaking, but banishing players is an extreme measure that can ruin other players' experiences and affect the atmosphere on the server. To remedy this issue, we're currently looking at ways to improve matchmaking, with our possible solutions including, not including, with our possible solutions including excluding inactive players from the matchmaking, or instituting a system where players can apply a temporary hiatus. They did this in Rise of Kingdoms, where you have like a vacation mode. Vacation mode basically makes it so that someone can't actually participate in the sort of seasonal KVK situation. We welcome any suggestions you may have on this matter. Yeah, so there's like several ways to slice it. One is there's a rogue player who we don't want in this server. We really want to kick them. In that situation, you almost need like a KVK registration, where it's like, these are the people that are on our team. Only include and only allow these people to teleport into KVK, right? That's like a registration solution to exclude bad actors. If your goal is to take people who are low performers, so not a bad actor, but a low performer, and say, you're a low performer, you're not on our team anymore, that's where also I think a registration makes sense, because you just don't include the low performers. They can't enter. They're not a part of your registration. You're saying that player needs to migrate. They now have the incentive that they need to migrate because they can't enter KVKs anymore. They got to go find a place, right? And like, it sucks, but like, hey, they could have been a team player and then they wouldn't have this problem. And the sort of final situation is like, hey, this player temporarily needs to go on vacation. They don't want to play this KVK, but they want to be a part of our community. They want to be a part of our team. What do we do? And that's where the temporary hiatus kind of makes sense. We're like, yeah, we don't want to kick this person out of our kingdom, but we also don't want to get punished for them being AFK all season. So that's where a temporary hiatus could make a lot of sense. Can you change the color of war pet damage so it's distinct? This is a great suggestion, and they agree. Yeah, this is great. This is a slam dunk decision. No questions asked, slam dunk. They honestly should look at adding colors to the battle log as well to make them easier to read. More color, distinguishing different types of damage. Will you add more elixir items to the merit store? We improve the rarity of elixir items in the merit store in this update. You'll now be able to obtain more elixir items. Cool. I have too many abandoned puppets. Will you introduce a way to get rid of them? This, to me, is like kind of a waste of a question, respectfully. Let's ask better things. Like, what? Yeah, they're going to say something very predictable. Thanks for your suggestion. Abandoned puppets are a good way for players to gain buffs and enjoy the early game, but after a while, they're less useful. We're aware that experienced players tend to have large stockpiles. We're currently designing a new way to scrap them. I'm shocked they're giving us a way to scrap them. Like, we have them, you use them when you need them, you stop using them when you don't need them anymore. I just think that's very simple. There's no way to see how similar hero, war pet, and artifact skills will combine with talent effects. Will you add this? I think that being able to understand how stuff works is very important, so more sophisticated battle log stuff sounds like a win. As players' understanding of the game has deepened, we've received more and more questions regarding effect combinations. The situation regarding effect stacking is rather complicated, and we're currently working to straighten out the rules and find new ways to convey this information clearly to players. For the moment, if you encounter any difficulties, please contact support and we will respond to every query. I will say their support is very, very responsive, but there are some things that like are a bit of a head scratcher for me, and like certain things don't combine. Like, I don't know if it's a bug or otherwise, but you know, I put these amazing healing skills on this one war pet. Let me go find it. And like, then I tested it and discovered they didn't stack. It's like, how am I supposed to know that? Right? Like, war pet healing skill granted, like it didn't stack with this war pet healing skill granted. And I don't know if it works now or what the situation is, but I was just like really shocked to be like, oh, I like wasted a ton of currency and got nothing, and what's happening here? So I think that the ability to like genuinely understand the way stuff's going to stack up is very, very, very critical. It should just be so intuitive that you don't need an explanation. But if it is needed because of complexity, I think it's almost better to just eliminate the complexity, to be honest. eliminate the weirdness. But I also think as a player, it would be very good to see did it all stack or not? Like, what's the real on what it's doing? Okay, from here, where are we? Will you increase the daily war pet capture limit? The war pet system is unlocked relatively early in Season 1, at a moment where players have multiple objectives they need to complete, making it an unsuitable place to make too many demands on players' time. I get that. In KVK seasons, maxing out the relevant policies will grant you 5 daily capture attempts, which we feel is a more suitable match for players' available energy. I sort of would flip this on its head, to be honest. So, like, the time where we really should have more pet captures because we have nothing to do is when we're in Home Kingdom. And once we're in a seasonal KVK, you can't like take away people's pet captures. It just feels weird. I don't know what the answer is. But like the time where I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs is when I'm in Home Kingdom, not when I'm in KVK. So they say, but I appreciate that I'd rather catch higher level war pets when I have more attempts. Whatever. Once the season finishes and you return to your home realm to await the new season, players have much more time to complete daily objectives. This is true. As a result, we're planning to increase the amount of war pets and resources in home realms during this period. Oh, good. Through events and gameplay, and increase available war pet capture attempts accordingly. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. No, this is exactly what I think should happen. We intend to balance out the experience of the period between KVK seasons while ensuring that the experience of KVK seasons itself remains unchanged. All right. Great. More stuff in downtime is a huge win. Will you simplify the process of appointing ministers so we can appoint players just by selecting their cities? We've recently received a lot of suggestions from officers who want us to simplify the process of appointing ministers. Currently, ministers cannot be directly appointed by selecting their cities. We're working to improve this. Cool. We understand the pressure that distributing titles can put on players. We're currently considering adding a title queue system that would take much of the repetition and monotony out of realm management. You know, it's so funny. Like, it's so funny. I used to spend hours giving out titles. And it's like the worst possible use of a player organizer's time, right? Like if I'm going to spend hours doing anything, there's got to be something more meaningful than mindlessly distributing titles. And it's almost like, have we lost the plot on what the point of the titles really are? If we need a queue system for the title, like why not just give everybody the training speed buff and not have the silliness of waiting for the buff? Actually asking. Right? Like actually asking, what value is the queue system adding? Like what value are we adding to the player experience? Okay? By making them wait to train their troops. Maybe there's a value there. Maybe it makes it feel more meaningful that you've been given the title. I don't know. But I almost sort of feel like, why? Why this weirdness at all? Would I rather have a training speed buff than not? Yes. So would I rather have the title than not? Yes. But like, I think it's good they're looking at this, but I'm sort of questioning what problem they're solving. And maybe they know something that I don't, which they probably do, that like, oh, actually having the title is like this really, trust me, making people wait for the queue is better. Okay. I don't know. Up next, the 30-member limit for the Alliance priority list is too low. Will you increase it? Yes, it's like very, very, very obviously too low. There's absolutely no question about it. And we're currently looking into how and why players use the priority list. We're considering ways to improve the system while preventing it from being abused. Let me explain. The reason people are switching between shells is to fight in seasonal battles, okay? And it's annoying. In fact, it is quite possibly players' current greatest annoyance in the game. To have to wait for an officer to approve them. And if you play, like, all you have to do is play the game for a very small amount of time in an active alliance as an officer to realize what an insanity it is having to constantly approve people switching between alliances. And a part of the reason people needed to switch between alliances, even just logistically, without fighting, was for villages. Because you could get a village, then switch alliances, and your village would still be active. Now, that's no longer the case, which removes one of the reasons why people were switching alliances so much. But, like, at the end of the day, fighters need to go where the fight is. That means you're switching between shells. And that also is a little bit of a weirdness where, like, all kingdoms need some number of fake shells currently, which, like, this points to a bigger weirdness, right? Where you need these shells to build lots of territory, but they're just shells. Like there's no real, it's not a real alliance. It's purely a shell alliance used in seasonal situations because the maps are too big and you have too many places you need to go, right? That's the only, like there's too many places you need to be and one shell can't go to all those places, which is the design of the game to limit how far a shell can go. And I think that's fine. But given that you need to be on all these different places and attack in all these different fronts, it creates the situation where now we need to switch between all these shells. Anyways, all that said, I feel like these are actually a lot of really good questions in here. And even the question where I was like, why even bother asking this? I got a surprising answer. The one about converting the items and getting value from them, the abandoned puppets. I think that's kind of cool. I mean, one of the things that I think is a good philosophy for game design is that good behaviors are always rewarded rather than punished, especially. So this player is saying, hey, I did this good behavior of getting all these abandoned puppets, but now that I've like got the main reward, I'm not getting any reward from them anymore. So this is basically an overflow progression system they've requested. And like, yeah, we're actually getting one, which is kind of neat. I think this is important stuff. I think for the future of the game, like these actually might be like the most important things to look at. Like, hey, balance the siege bastions and also like make it so that players can properly develop their communities and manage it tightly. And no, I think this is great. I think this is a very good Q&A here. 10 out of 10. I'm very happy with this. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. What should the developers have answered? What's your question that didn't get answered? Let me know down below. All right. And until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies. Take care, everybody.